Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well in the middle of summer, or is it officially the middle of summer, or did it just start? I guess it just started, not even officially yet. I think we have a few more days of this. So
Feels
summerly
like out there for sure.
It's summer like. Yeah, even up here in what everybody thinks that Canadians live in igloos. It's hot up here at times.
Believe me. I thought you were talking about Aurora. What would Aurora be? The Hamptons of Toronto?
Well, I've heard that Aurora is the richest place in Canada to live. I don't see that, but I'm certainly not rich, so whatever. But yeah, I've heard that. So houses here, I think, are insanely expensive, but they're like that everywhere. I mean, it's crazy times. But anyway, we're going to do a kind of a different thing today. We're going to play a popular a clip that addresses a funny thing. At least in the clip, it's presented funny and extreme. But we'll pick it apart, and it's probably something most of you guys out there are experiencing. At least the young guys are. We'll see how it goes. So let's just play it and get on with it. All right, here we go.
I need someone who's at least 6'8", and he has to be driving a hypercar, maybe a Bugatti or a Pagani. And I want him to be making at least 12 figures a month. And he can't have kids already because I already have 3 kids. And he has to have a business under his name if he wants to be with me. He has to be very religious, and I want him to have an 8-pack. And has to be 250 pounds, all muscle, no fat, of course. And he has to be tan with big brown eyes.
Okay, but what do you have to offer?
Excuse me? What do I have to offer? Are you serious right now?
Like, what do you bring to the table?
I bring meat. What else should I bring?
Like, can you cook at least?
No, I don't do cooking. What the hell?
Can you clean?
Do I look like a maid? No, I don't do cleaning either.
Do you have a job?
Pretty girls don't work. I know I was wasting my time talking to you. I need a real man who's gonna take care of me.
What do you mean, real man? There's nothing about you that's real. Your whole body's fake.
I literally have the best surgeon in Miami, and he worked on me.
But who the hell do you think you are? You're literally, you have kids. You literally have kids, and
I knew I'm wasting my
I don't know if there was more to that. Then that's kind of cut off pretty quick.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I know, kind of extreme, but I think the point is,
it's
obviously,
in order to draw out a phenomenon that I think a lot of men have been noticing, especially in the manosphere, if that exists. Like people talk about this.
Well, the whole incel thing and everything. I mean, just get rid of women. They're too demanding and they don't bring anything to the table. I think it's funny when what he asked, do you cook? I mean, it's like, really, is that all you need? Like, if she said yes to all of his questions about what she brings to the table, it's like, gee, you don't really expect much. At least the thing she wants from him makes sense. You know, they're like important, but what he wants from her is like, do you cook? Do you clean the house?
I don't even know. I don't even think that's the incel position. I think the incel position is far more. There's far more tension. It's like, I desperately want women, but all they do is reject me because I'm not their standards, right? Yeah. And so it's a kind of approach avoidance. I desperately want it, but I'm afraid to try because I'm going to get rejected. And there's unfairness of that leads to homicidal, suicidal ideation, annihilation fantasies.
Wow, now you're getting serious.
Well, yeah, what we're talking about with these incels, right? It's like either I annihilate the feminine that causes me so much distress because I can't ever attain it, or I annihilate myself so that I no longer feel the suffering of not having it.
Where do you think, though, that this idea that that women can demand what they feel is fair to demand, and men can't demand anything? They don't have to. They're not allowed to ask for certain standard things, but the women can. Where did that come from, and what is that about?
Well, I mean, immediately I think of the great Simone de Beauvoir, who I've always thought of as one of the greatest of the feminists, if such things exist. Yeah? And if you read Le Deuxième Sexe, she goes into a kind of really basic evolutionary transactional understanding of what's happening between the sexes. And, you know, she says, well, you know, men want to have sex and procreate. And for the evolved male who understands that that he is the father of children, and, you know, of course, that he wants to protect his lineage, and, you know, and so there's this exchange, you know. He's going to offer protection and provision and presence in exchange for sex, and in exchange for, you know, having children and having his children reared. And there's this kind of transaction, you know. And I like that's a starting point for, like, let's just understand what's happening here on a biological, fundamentally transactional. We'll get love out of it. We'll get all this stuff out of it, and just come back to what that is.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, you know, and then it goes into more ambiguity, where it's like, you know, how much does the man owe the woman? You know, can he, whatever. So there is a natural gatekeeping that happens biologically, which is that, like, you know, and I was thinking too about, I don't know if we were talking about this or with somebody else, but we were talking about Chirac, the Spike Lee movie that was based on an ancient Greek play that's eluding my mind, but it was the story being that the women in this culture, whatever, this area, go on a sex strike. They say, we're going to withhold sex from the men until they stop this nonsense of war. These stupid idiots are getting their, you know, they're getting their egos involved in wanting to go to war, and we've had enough, and so we'll withhold sex. So I think there's that, and I think, but what you're seeing in this clip, there's a biological element to it, a kind of a biological transactional kind of problem that the masculine and the feminine are kind of constantly working around. And then now, but what you're seeing is that that's now being distorted and problematized through a lens of feminist ideas that are kind of misdirected. You know, this idea, like, I'm of total value, and you're not. You owe everything to me because I'm a woman, I'm therefore inherently wonderful. Because you're a man, you're therefore inherently nothing to me. And I think that's also technological too. Let's not forget that part, which is that we are more and more and more able to be self-reliant because tech is able to fill in. You know, you think too about you know, just after Simone de Beauvoir, we get into Betty Friedan and this whole movement away from an understanding of that as, like, not technologically based. So once women now have, like, all this time freed up because they have dishwashers and they have people to help them and they have whatever tech to do this, that's when women are now freed up to be able to even think about concepts of liberation in a different way. But it also gives them this kind of, like, this liberation, the pill, you know, tons of liberation. And then the balance starts to shift, where it's like, oh, you know, like, I have all this freedom, I have all this liberty, I have now this belief that I shouldn't think of myself as lesser, and the scales start to tip, and it's a kind of it's an inflation. It's like it's a grandiosity that I think comes from a moving away from biological realities and moving away from a recognition of the sacredness of the masculine, and into, just because I can transcend this, I should. And in fact, it makes me a feminist, and it's the right thing to do. To like to my value as a compensation for the deflation of past generations of women who felt that they were undervalued,
yeah,
respected.
You know, it is interesting listening to what you're saying, thinking that we've reached a point. This isn't true across the board, of course, that a lot of the work that men do nowadays is not physical. Yet all of the work that women are expected to do from a traditional point of view is highly physical. She has to cook, clean the house, take care of the kids. So it's imbalanced in that sense. Of course, if you have a couple where the man is a construction worker, say, you don't have that issue that I'm bringing up. But I think, you know, the man goes, if he's a financial advisor or a banker or something, he goes to work and he sits at a desk and looks at a computer all day, where the wife is expected to be at home washing dishes and fixing food and whatnot. So what you're saying there, I think applies to that to some degree, that there is a little bit, well, why do I have to do that? What are you going to bring me? Because I'm working my ass off to raise your kids. What are you going to bring me to compensate for that? I mean, and this clip also, it focuses, which is just, I mean, it's just a silly cartoon thing, but it's interesting how it focuses on the material almost entirely. He doesn't demand from her sex, which would be the first on the list. Like, what are you going to give me? Are we going to have sex all the time or whenever I want it? And she doesn't really present what she wants from him in a, are you going to provide? Are you going to make a secure world for me and the children? Or it's just, you're going to bring me money and you're going to bring me looks and, what makes you manly and that. So, it's kind of interesting in that sense. But again, it's just a silly thing. It's not meant to solve the problem or anything like that.
No, but you're making a good point, which is, and this is something that I think I noticed with like Simone de Beauvoir, is that actually she has a more masculine take on feminism, which is that she, in at least there, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's places where this isn't true, but because she comes at it as a philosopher, she's analytical, and there's a coldness to it, and it becomes transactional. But what's missing in that, and especially in the manosphere and in this way of looking at it, is that there's no feminine here. To bring in the feminine is, it's completely insane that, and it's completely, I don't know how I'm going to provide for you, or you're totally incapable of meeting, doing the emotional labor of the, of a family, but still I love you and I can't not be with you. And it's crazy.
It's not
thing I'm about to do, and the transactionality of it feels like completely alien to Swept Up in Love. And in fact, if we've learned anything, the more barriers you put between the lovers, the more they burn for each other. The more irrational and crazy it is, the more they burn for it. And so there's that whole element that's sort of like scrubbed out of this. And that's the thing with the incel, is the incel is living in a world in which there is such a void of the feminine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the incel's yearning for not women, not sex. That's the illusion. If only I could have intercourse, then somehow I could soothe this burning desire to be held with tenderness and unconditional love and acceptance, but you won't get that through sex. And the culture is devoid of it. And what you're seeing in this cartoon of a young woman is a woman who's devoid of the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
She's lost in her masculine. She's thinking of everything as transactional, and it's very cold and it's very unempathetic. There's no feminine in her. It's almost like a sort of cruel joke. The guy's like, what do you bring to the table? Well, what she's certainly not bringing in her transactional understanding of things is any tenderness, warmth, love, an ability to be swept away in that beautiful, irrational, big R romantic way.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
the romantics, man, they were reactionaries. They saw this shit coming.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, it was like, how do we preserve the soul in all of this? And
well, that's really what all of it boils down to. I mean, it's the loss, the idea of what's going on in the world now is this idea of eradicating the humanity, eradicating the soul. And you don't have to be religious to understand what soul is. I mean, everybody interfaces with it every day, all the time. They're interfacing with this, what would be considered materially irrational. I don't make decisions based on my heart. I make decisions based on pragmatism and objective reality. And this little clip is a really good example of a relationship that is based on nothing that has anything to do with soul and anything to do with the feminine. And as well as the masculine, if you look at it from an archetypal perspective, that's not represented here either. So, this is a product of the culture, of the current culture, at least in the West. I'm not sure how it is. I'm not sure how it is in Idaho. I mean, I don't know. It's just, this is what we see. And the media like these cartoons and these jokes and whatever that come up are reflecting that this is an issue that is going on, and it's of course presented in this really black and white kind of unconscious way, but it's still saying, why do we have to put up with this shit, you know?
But you notice too that both of them, if you were to see it through a therapeutic lens, are suffering from self-absorption.
Oh, absolutely.
She's like, what do you this is what I bring. What do you bring?
Yeah.
She's struggling to mentalize and empathize and be able to like actually put herself in his shoes and see what it is. She's alienated. She's cut off. She's lost in this bubble of herself, and that disconnectedness, I think, is the loss of soul that the big R romantic movement was trying to avoid. And then people will be like, I hear the kind of critic in my mind about, oh, I don't know. So what do you think that like what'll save us now is poetry? Nobody reads poetry anymore. And I just smile and I go, you got to be kidding me. It's blaring through every headphone and every radio and every television and every computer all the time. You just don't think it's poetry. How many people, if you ask them, I don't like poetry, and then they like kind of like, fuck, whatever, I don't like poetry, and then they put their earphones in and turn on music and start listening to poetry.
Yeah, but that's a good point. I mean, to analyze deeper. But I mean, this is a guess. This doesn't have any basis in any fact at all. But I doubt seriously people that listen to music listen to lyrics and listen to actually what's being said. I'm sure people do, but certainly my generation did, and even the one right after mine did. But I don't know if people still, even though, like you're saying, they listen to music. I don't know if they're listening to poetry. I'd say certainly don't recognize it if they are, but, and it can enter in, it can come in subliminally. It doesn't have to be through the brain, through intellect that they're getting the effect of it. So I would agree with that, but I mean, it's a really good point. It would be very interesting to know that, but me, and I've said this, everybody out there does too, if anybody's watching these things all the way through. I believe that's one of the primary reasons why. I don't know if it's a result or if it's a cause, that we don't read poetry anymore, and we don't listen to music that is not designed to affect the more rhythmic, the more very basic, fundamental responses to music, which is generally not. I mean, it's generally the body or the head or the intellect, or not even the intellect, but it's a very primal element of music, which is the beat, the rhythm, the loud sound of it, not just volume wise, but just the intensity of it, and that's not really music, not in the way that it affects the heart. No. And okay, we can call it music, whatever. Do whatever you want to do.
For you, there was a turning point when people realized that the food that they were eating was void of nutrition, and they started to go, wait a minute, hold on, there's no nutrition in this. And then they started to go, wait a minute, hold on, the whole thing is fucking poison. And I think more people realize now than even 20 years ago that the food that they're eating is void of nutrition and fucking poisoned.
You think people really know that? Yeah. Are you saying there are people that know that? There are people that do know that, but do you really think the masses know that?
I mean, do the masses know? I think that we are now in a period of awakening to that like we've never seen before.
True.
I think,
but we've also never seen the poison like we've seen it now.
Exactly, and I think more and more people, it's my experience and what I'm noticing in the culture is more and more people are starting to ask those questions. Now, are they still en masse, completely, whatever, still addicted and consuming it? Yeah, for now, but the movement is going in the right direction. There's no reason to believe that people won't find the same thing with the poetry that we find in the form of lyrics.
I think eventually,
and full of topics.
I agree with you. I think eventually, I don't think we'll reach a point where we'll be completely destroyed in this sense, like soulless in this sense, without eventually getting it. It may be too late, but eventually getting it and understanding this isn't working. I mean, the media shows this, not the news media, but the artistic media, like movies and television series. They're always hinting at this. They're always saying, "Oh, gee, this is Armageddon. This is the point where people become soulless, and they become zombies." And I mean, the whole zombie concept. That's exactly what it is. I mean, you can become mechanical animal machines that just eat and kill, and so yeah, I totally believe that. I mean, that's what my spiritual belief is that we'll only go so far, but we won't fall off the cliff,
Right.
and eventually that'll happen. It ain't coming anytime soon, though. I mean, the food thing, probably, just like you're saying, we're already on that path of understanding that, but the loss of soul, the loss of humanity, people are eating up the loss of humanity. Of course, it's being driven by the overall agenda. I mean, that it wants us to lose our humanity in order to have more control.
Every second song is about the end of the world.
What?
Every second song is about the end of the world.
Yeah.
But the if you think about what nutritionists do, holistic nutritionists do, I mean, one of the first things that they would do with someone that came to them for guidance would be to get them to start reading labels. Just look. Right. Look at not just the macronutrient breakdown of the food that you're eating, but also read the label and see what's this, what's that, what the fuck is this. Look for things that have smaller ingredients. Know the difference between sugar versus maltodextrin. So what does that mean for us guides of souls? It's to look closely at what you're taking in. Read the label on the music that you consume, the shows that you watch, the pornography that you consume, the whatever. And what you can do is you can say, when you do that now, you can have discernment. Oh, I know the difference that when I consume this, I feel better. When I eat grass-fed beef that's pure, clean, cooked in tallow, a little sea salt, that's it. I feel good. I feel alive. When I eat garbage, I feel like shit. Well, when you listen to music that's void of nutrients and full of toxins, you don't feel as good. And when you're
but isn't that all? I mean, yeah, I'm not disagreeing at all, but it's the feeling good part. It's like you either feel good when you're doing it, or you feel good after you've done it, or feel bad.
And I mean,
absolutely, that's what we're talking about. That always is the controller. That's the instant gratification is what drives most people.
Sure.
I feel better right at this moment as I eat this cheeseburger. I feel like shit 10 minutes later. Mm-hmm. And I feel neutral if I eat the grass-fed beef. Mm-hmm. It's okay, but it's not the same as the cheeseburger. Yep. Okay, but I feel better a couple of minutes later, but who gives a shit? It's that instant moment. This is better instantly than this.
Yeah. Well, I was saying to somebody recently, who was sort of in a similar sort of dilemma of, my suggestion was, I think you need to look this person in the eyes and tell them to grow the fuck up. And maybe that person has been waiting desperately for someone to tell them that. They won't like to hear it, But that's what I think when I see this depiction of this woman. And how you see in the culture women going on camera or whatever and sort of unapologetic and shamelessly announcing this kind of this unfair kind of grandiose sense that they are owed everything and owe nothing in return. I mean, I ultimately think what's needed is for the people for whom they have ears to hear it to be told to grow the fuck up.
Exactly. What does that mean? What does that mean exactly? What is maturity? Just, most people think maturity just means you're older, your brain is more developed, and I mean, number one on the maturity list is instant gratification is not as powerful as something you feel or whatever comes later. That's not just with eating, that's with skill, that's with taking care of your body, that's with taking care of your money, taking care of your business. It's all that. That's a whole marshmallow. Mm-hmm. The marshmallow experiment. Okay, what's next on the list that would imply somebody's mature? Other than instant grat, maybe that's the only one on the list.
I think the delay of gratification is a result of a different process. Okay. One of the things that I've noticed recently is that the doorway seems often to me. And this is something about the critique of psychotherapy and counseling as it's evolved to its current state. One, launched quite effectively by the likes of James Hillman, but others as well. And it's the old JFK line: ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Now, if you want to scrub that out of its nationalism, just say, ask not what the community can do for you, but what you can do for the community. And also what it breaks down to is, here's a classic dilemma. I can't find a job that suits me, that gratifies my sense of what I'm worth and what I'm interested in. And so I've been stuck perpetually looking for the world to satisfy my need. And oftentimes the kick in the ass that's needed is, have you ever thought to ask what the community or what the market is looking for?
Okay, this is a really important one. The first one is delaying gratification. The second one has to do with being more conscious of other people, community, whatever, than yourself. It's a non-narcissistic.
I'm saying that the delayed gratification is the result of going through a maturation process in which you're actually not directly attempting to expand your tolerance for delayed gratification. I would say that it's fundamentally about doing enough internal reflection, working through that as deeply as you can in order to get out of that, to work all the way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And get to the point where you can recognize that what the community is asking for you. What one of the things that I would often tell people is the result of good therapy or good transformational work and healing work is that you get to the point where you've now created an abundance of energy and attention and presence that you can then give to the community that needs it, and so that the community around you can be supported and raise you up. That's the point, is to get out of your fucking head. It's not to continue.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I'd like to, and I know you can do this and I can't. I'd like for you to come up with a very short sentence that, and I know you're talking about this as the instant gratification thing as a result. I understand what you're saying, but let's focus on this idea just for my gratification, that there is a maturity point where you stop thinking about giving yourself gratification, that you start thinking about others. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to make a clarification, and maybe this isn't a clarification of what you're saying, but what you're saying to me when you use the word community, I think community involves your own family as well as the people around you, and people that live next door or whatever. It's the community, meaning not you, meaning what it is that's around you that you're partially responsible for. So, because I agree with you, thinking about clients, thinking about, if I have a client come in, I can usually kind of reduce the problem down to these basic immaturities, grow the fuck up kind of thing. And one of them, the first one being doesn't have to be the first one, but one of them is the instant gratification. Okay. The other one is start thinking about other people other than yourself.
Well, yeah, stop waiting for mommy and daddy to come and save you.
Well, that's the truth about it. Yeah.
Well, that's anger and grief that they weren't there for you, and recognize that they're never coming, and it's your responsibility.
Right.
But again, it's it's not as much as it seems kind of stern to get over it. It's like what I really mean when I say, get over it or grow the fuck up, it's actively work through the grief and the anger that you're carrying toward your parents. Release it from the body, discharge it, work through it, talk it out, scream it out, fight it out, fuck it out, do whatever you got to do, clear that away so that you can now see your parents as human beings, not the oppressors that you saw them as through the lens of trauma, right? And also stop waiting around for someone to come in, for them to change and become the great parents you always needed them to be, or for somebody else that plays that role to come and save you, and start doing the hard work of saving yourself. That's what I mean. And it's not about instantly you should just get over it, just drop the nonsense and move on. Although there are some cases in which that is a kind of
we wish it was that easy, but even saying grow the fuck up, it's like, well, what does that mean?
Take responsibility for yourself. Stop looking for other people to solve your
problems. There's certainly strategies and processes for developing that.
Yeah.
The cognitive behavioral approach is to stop certain behavior and whatever. But there's also a deeper psychodynamic element going on here, because the parent thing, say, to use that as an example, if there is trauma in your life through your parents, those form unconscious systems that you can't just say, well, I'm just going to forget about that. I'm going to just bypass that, because they still have an impact on you. So the way we dissolve those and dismantle that is through therapy and through introspection and whatever. So there are things you can do, certainly, but it's not always about that. I do believe that your parental trauma that you've gone through in your life has a huge, if not a massively statistical reality to it. But there's also and I would say most people, maybe not most, somewhere in the middle, people do not recognize the parental trauma of childhood, or just childhood, whether it be parents or caregivers or whatever. They don't recognize that as the reason why they only focus on themselves.
Yeah. But it's debatable. I'm not like, look, I'm essentially, like most people in my profession, I'm a Freudian. I mean, that Freud was the one who essentially, one of his great discoveries beyond just the existence of the unconscious was that the root of adult neuroses lies in unmet developmental needs and tensions and unresolved tensions in your childhood. That's
unmet what? What did you say?
Developmental needs in unconscious, tensions in your early childhood and dysfunctional family dynamics. I mean, that's essentially Freud. We can argue that there are tons of precursors, but that's essentially Freudian. On the other hand, there are legitimate challenges to that. Adler brings in a very legitimate challenge in which he downplays that and says, that's a place in which you can get stuck. Let's focus on the here and now, right now, and moving you beyond that. And I don't think he's wrong. And also, like, moving away from the internal, reflective navel gazing that we can get lost in, and moving out into the community and seeing yourself as part of the community. And I think, essentially what I was saying, the JFK line about asking what the community needs of you,
right,
is, and I'm not an Adlerian expert or anything, but I think that's probably consistent with Adlerian approach, right? So, and I'll tell people that it's, top down and bottom up. It's like, the bottom up stuff is to understand where this is coming from in you. And because I'm essentially a Freudian, I mean, not that I follow Freudian analysis, but like at its root, philosophically,
right.
I do spend quite a lot of time looking for it, not in a Freudian way where we or like a Kleinian way where it's like we're going to just pound on your childhood until
right.
5 hours a week. We're going to come out every second of your life. But I'm saying to people that's in service of moving you to techniques of how to cope, and then ultimately that Adlerian moving outward and moving beyond the self, which is one of the things that I like. Rather than doing sliding scale or pro bono work, what I want to move into now is, if you need to, work with me, but you can't afford it, if you go out and do 2 hours of community service, I'll give you an hour of therapy.
Oh, that's very cool. I never thought of that.
Yeah. And the only problem I can see with that is that it might be too effective, in that if you actually really do go out and do 2 hours of community service, you might not need therapy.
That's right. That's right. Your payment method will actually cure your client.
Yeah, the minute you find yourself cleaning out the refrigerator of some, invalid elderly person and realizing that your liberation lies.
I think that's brilliant, though. I think that's a brilliant concept. You're absolutely right, though. Yep. But isn't that your primary intention anyway? Is to help people psychologically?
I can guide people in that direction, but there's only so many people who will sort of take me up on the offer.
Right.
What I like about that is that when it comes to pro bono or sliding scale work, it's kind of like, well, you kind of have to. I make that like a kind of.
That's great. That's great. Because really, I'm telling clients all the time to go out and volunteer and do that. I mean, that's a huge therapeutic process.
Get out of your people.
Right. But people seldom will do it, because obviously it's one of the easiest ones to let your ego take over and say, "Oh, fuck that shit, I'm not going to do that." But when you give it when you incentivize it by saying, well, you won't have to pay me as much money for the therapy, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love it.
But you know,
I won't do it. But I
you won't do it. You won't do it, Todd, because you're, you know.
no, yeah, I'm in Aurora. That's why I don't do it, because everybody has money up here. I mean, it is interesting.
You don't do it because you're a schizoid depressive.
That's right.
As far as,
That's right.
but by the way, that's not an accusation, because you and every other fucking therapist is at least depressive with schizoid features. But that's why
you know, it's interesting where you bring that up. I don't know if you've seen what's his name, Prager. Is that his name? The really super ultra conservative guy.
Oh, Prager University. I think I
know
the guy.
Right. Have you seen his clip where he talks about psychotherapy? Well, he talks about psychiatrists, which he doesn't actually give the reason why psychiatry is a problem. He actually lumps in the whole idea of psychotherapy, and he says just what you're saying. He says, what is it that somebody comes into to a therapist practice, and the therapist goes, well, how are you feel? And they tell a story about being a real shithead, let's say, or being very, focused on instant gratification, or whatever these things are. And the therapist goes, well, tell me how you feel about that. And the whole validation process of like letting them feel like what they're thinking and what they're feeling is okay, it's valid, or whatnot. And Prager says, no, they should be saying, grow the fuck up. I mean, it's like, it's like, get yourself together.
We gotta clarify here, because we have to take. There's a huge difference between psychiatry and psychotherapy, even though there are some crossovers, and they do philosophically bleed into each other and have problematic cores. But even within psychotherapy, my God, man, there's 99% of what we call psychotherapy, right? And then there's the top 1%. And it's the top 1% that's actually doing therapy, and the 99% that's just fucking jerking off, right? And those are the ones that will overly lean on normalization and validation, because they don't have any other techniques. They don't know. They don't know how to sit with anything. They don't know how to inquire. They don't. And so that becomes this go-to for most therapists that are flooding the market to meet demand. By the way, I mean, one of the reasons why they're flooding the market with these people that have these, degrees from a fucking vending machine is that there's a market demand for it, right? And they're all and now, BetterHelp and these things scoop them up and sort of turn them into sort of Uber drivers of therapy. But that's like,
I like that.
But if you critique that, if your critique is of the 99%. And then that might
he actually says it's 60%. He said only 30% of therapists are decent.
No, that's I disagree completely.
Yeah, well, and I know what you're getting to. I mean, there is a place for validation through trauma. There's a place for normalization and saying, well, you're a human being, but there's also a place for saying, you know what, this ain't gonna work, what you're doing. You need to grow up, not necessarily in those words. I mean, you never say grow the fuck up. But
normalization and validation of experience is one of the most essential tools in the toolkit of psychotherapeutic and counseling techniques for healing and transformation. The problem is that there are many practitioners for whom that's the only tool that they bring.
Exactly. I agree.
And when you don't have any other access to any other techniques, especially when we're talking about, like what Rollo May was saying, which is that like essentially any therapy that relies on any technique at all is not therapy.
Right.
That may be the more extreme version, because I think there are plenty of modalities that are very systematic, even somatic approaches that are actually quite sort of in a way can be even seen as manualized, because they're pretty rigid in how they do things. Those are super effective, right? We know that. But Rollo May is also, in his arrogance and grandiosity, onto something profound there. Right, which is that there is something about really effective psychotherapy and counseling that you can't break down into constituents part. You can't manualize it. It's really difficult. It's about sitting in ambiguity. It's about moment-to-moment interactions. It's about the relationship. It's about being at ease with unanswerable questions. It's
about the soul.
It's about the soul. One of the things that I'll say is that, like, a core problem with psychiatry and bad psychotherapy is that they fundamentally believe that the problems of humanity or being human are solvable Whereas in my training as an existential psychotherapist and now being an existential counselor, we are constantly having to remind the client that the problem that you have is just a problem because you live in a body and you live in time and space and you're human, and that's not going anywhere. Your dread against annihilation, losing the body, you're never going to get away from that, nor should you, because that's what it means to be alive, is to know that this aliveness will come to its end. If you remove that, there is no humanity. There is no reason to live. If you lived forever, what would you live for? Nothing. So you have
right.
And I'm not saying that, like, by those definitions that the gold standard of psychotherapy and counseling is essentially existential, but it is. But it does work toward that ambiguity tolerance which is also, I think, to answer your question about like what constitutes maturity. I mean, there are many different sort of ways to look at that from a biological, versus an ego thing. But I would say that ambiguity tolerance, being able to sit with with paradox. I mean, that's John Keats. That's the thing. What makes a poet? He calls it negative capability, the capacity to sit with these things, with these two opposing views and not collapse them, not need to collapse them, and to be able to be in there long enough for the beauty of the paradox to expose itself, the complexity.
Well, this is what Jung was always saying, that it's in the shoot, I can't remember his phrase, but it's in the confusion. I mean, it's in the middle of the paradox. There's another word, my brain isn't working with that, but that was his whole thing. It was in the conflict, it was in the confusion where real life was. And going back to the clip, I mean, that is interesting that the clip actually is presenting the current world sense that there's an answer to everything, that there's the settled demand. This is what I want from you, and it's black and white. There's no ambiguity.
The difference is, if women lowered their standards, things would get better.
Huh?
The inference of that clip is that the trouble is that women have too high standards, and if they were to lower their standards, that things would get better. But I'm not prepared.
That's not true. No, right.
And also,
right. I'm not prepared to do that. Right.
But as much as I think people are onto something with this critique, and as many kind of egregious examples you could find of this attitude being presented, I also do think that it's important to remember that's just narrowing in on one tip. Now, you could say that's a tip of a bigger iceberg, sure, but I also want to remind people that vast majority of women don't have that attitude, find that attitude completely ridiculous, and have a lot of respect for the masculine, and don't feel as though they are owed the world and that men owe them nothing. That is not a representation.
I'd be curious to know what the statistics are on that, because I definitely would agree. I mean, from seeing my clients, I don't see this. And I think I was telling you that before we started. I think it's interesting. I do think it's in the culture, but I'm wondering how much of it is, again, agenda driven, if it's something that the culture wants people to think and is pushing it out there and making it prolific. And these clips are, I thought of the Jung thing. It's tension of the opposites.
Yeah,
that was his line, where he said that's where life is in the tension of the opposites. Right. And it's everything you're saying. And I like and I think we were talking about this before we started, so maybe you might want to explain a little more this idea of ambiguity tolerance. And this again is so prevalent in the culture now. Is taking sides. I know what's right, I know what's true, I have information that's settled, that is true, and what you believe is not. Isn't that, and there's no gray area with anything. There's no, and you're saying, as you were saying earlier, that humans have to have an ambiguity tolerance, which means they have to be tolerant of not knowing what something actually is, because there isn't anything that actually is anything. I mean, there is always another side to something. There's always different contexts. There's different, I always say what's good for the snake isn't good for the mouse. It's like you have these that's simplistic stuff, but humans seem to be in this stage now where they can make like the demands this cartoon girl is making and saying all of these things, and like going, really? This, you don't want to be with a man that doesn't have these things, and she says that over and over and over again.
That's nothing I'm pointing out is that as much as you can present this as a phenomenon, it's only an illusion. I mean, like if you were to actually find a woman like that, I think very quickly upon inquiry, that whole belief would kind of fall apart. I think underneath of that is a young woman who is desperate to find loving connection and who doesn't see herself in those grandiose entitled terms, who just seeks,
not consciously, no, but
presence. But let me come back to your point, because I think that was a good one about ambiguity tolerance. And we were talking before we came on and recorded, was this issues that we face now, the big one, like Israel Palestine. And the problem with it, why is it that you find people who have, on the left, for example, who apparently have absolutely zero empathy for Israelis? Zero. Intelligent, mature people normally in every other way, or have an intact feeling function and care and empathetic, but this, not a drop of empathy. They won't say a word. They won't recognize it at all. And on the other side, you have angry Israelis who completely blame everything on Hamas. They could never in a million years imagine that Israel could be held accountable for anything that it's done wrong. Well, how do we get here? And part of it is because the problem in Israel and Palestine is fucking complicated to the point that there is no answer. There's no solution. Yeah. And I think everyone has kind of known that for a long time, that there's just no solution to this problem. It doesn't mean that it won't eventually come to some kind of resolution. I believe that it will. But
solution and resolution are two different things.
Exactly.
Radically. And people don't think that.
But I don't think that we're able to think our way out of this one. And when you get into that place that you can't rationalize and think your way out of it, then it becomes overwhelming. And that's the splitting function where, okay, now I have to split that into two, and I need it to be. Wouldn't it be so great if the problem was that Zionists were inherently wicked?
Oh, yeah.
The core, these people are just, and if we get rid of them, problem solved. It'll all be over. And likewise, if we just eradicate every member of Hamas, if we kill every single one of them and anyone that's still standing, they'll lay down their arms and we'll take them prisoner, then problem solved.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of them are right. And it's a terrifying, overwhelming thought that there isn't a way out of it. And I think that's how we get into the splitting function of like, okay, well, I'm forced to now see things this way because I can't sit in the tension of that. And one of the things that I tell people, close the gap. Either don't pay attention at all, and that will decrease your suffering. Just don't look at the fucking news. But if you're going to look at the news, you have to go all the way in, and you have to be dedicated.
That's a hugely
questioning and
good point.
Reading and this side and that side, but don't be in the middle, because that's striking distance. We learned this in combat, right? You want to close the gap. You want to be so far that the guy can't hit you, or too close that he can't hit you, but not here, because now you're in striking range.
And that's where this is a different episode with me constantly using the phrase the agenda, but that's the intention behind it, because you don't want the masses to think ambiguity or tolerate ambiguity. You want the masses to take sides and to be on one or the other side, because then whichever side you're on has more power over those people. Can say, well, you're on the Palestinian side, therefore you don't see any gray area in what we're doing, so we can do whatever we want. And if you're on the other side, it's the same thing. Yeah. So that's part of the point.
That you get into this panic over Marxism, right? Where it's like the right loves to blame everything on Marxism and how postmodern Marxist ideas have infiltrated the academia, and the problem with them is they see things in black and white and blah 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 blah. Great, that's a really effective tool for you to ignore the criticisms of capitalism that Marx launched that are unavoidable. Mm-hmm. By just saying, oh no, well we don't, because when that becomes socialism or communism, masses of people suffer, and it must be done at the barrel of a gun. But you're ignoring now what Marx is saying about how everyone is completely entranced and who's completely losing soul to the hypnosis of consumer culture. right? That critique is no, we don't have to listen to that, because if we follow that critique and take it seriously, everyone will be communist, which is bullshit. So they can split that off, and they can say, no, shut up, Marxist. We don't want to hear a damn word from you. Postmodernism, that's your trouble. The funny thing with the postmodernists is they actually do quite a good job of being an ambiguity tolerance. They not only is it about tolerating ambiguity, they proliferate ambiguity and complexity in a way that's dizzying for people that need to be on solid ground. They can't take it. The person.
So let's
hear a dot, because he makes you crazy in not knowing everything. It's like Nietzsche, he will make you crazy.
So let's say we have a healthy dose of ambiguity tolerance. What do we do then? Jung is talking about tension of the opposites, which I would assume the tension of the opposites kind of correlates with the idea of ambiguity. Mm-hmm. The paradox, uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to tolerate it, does it mean we ignore it? Does it mean we just let it be? Or do we actually do something in that life energy and power of the tension of the opposite?
It requires a balance between conscious, intentional, and active engagement, and conscious and intentional, active disengagement, and to intentionally and skillfully navigate those polarities. So here's what I mean. Like in this particular case, what it would mean is to be actively involved is to not only watch things that you see on YouTube and the news about a conflict like Israel and Palestine, but also to read deeply into both perspectives, to go into Instagram and to see what it looks like from that person's feed, to see them constantly bombarded with mutilated children, and then also to come to the other side and go and see the video of what happened on October 7th and really put your eyes on what it looks like when they come over the fence and start to murder people and burn people alive. You have to do both. And then you have to back that up with historical understanding. Then you have to back that up with critical thinking. Then you have to back that up. It's exhausting to be that engaged in it. But if you want to be engaged on that topic, that's what it's going to take. Now, what's the opposite side? How do you balance that? You also need to know when enough is enough and to pull out of it and go take a walk in the woods. Go find a moment to drop into the body, have a meditative practice, embodiment practice. And you have to navigate between the two. And it's really fucking hard to do. And it takes a lot of maturity. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of conscious engagement. You can't check out, which is what everyone wants to do when they feel like.
Well, yeah, isn't that the driver of being intolerant, is that instant gratification again, where you either feel really good or you feel really, really riled up and angry. Those are those pure feelings. You don't want to feel ambiguous. As you say about anything, I mean, that's what is that whole bias? What is that term? Where you look for news and information that supports your bias. Now let's go back to the clip and just look at like what would that girl in the clip do with her whatever she was taught to believe that this is what a good relationship is a guy that fits all of these things. What would she do along the lines of what we've been talking about within the context of this ambiguity tolerance and whatever? What is it that she would need to do in order to approach her situation of choosing a man?
Well, you're not likely to find too much success in trying to talk her out of it, are you?
No, but let's just assume she's a different person, and not look at her therapeutically, like what would her treatment be, but just to say if she.
Mm-hmm. I think you could. I think within the frame of therapy, if that person is willing to is bought in to self-reflection and is willing to be essentially deprogrammed, right?
Let's assume she's been deprogrammed. How would she approach it? How would she approach having her needs met in a relationship without it being this clip, like what she's doing? What would she do differently?
Can you ask that question in a different way? Because I'm not sure what you're asking.
Yeah, well, let me start to answer it. I want to hear what you think, but let me start to answer it.
Good, that'll work.
Earlier you were commenting on romance, and you were commenting on what it is that actually brings value to a relationship, that they're not necessarily materialistic things. But we can make an assumption that she goes into a situation acquiring information about it that she doesn't have to ask about. Like if she's on a dating app, she'll have certain information about that person. Let's say she's not. Let's say she runs into somebody in the way that it used to happen, like not at a bar, but let's say some communal event, like at church or something. And she likes the guy. She just likes. He just doesn't look like an asshole, and is nice. He's good looking. He's whatever. And she goes out on a date with him, and she finds out certain things through this organic process that he does have a career set up, and she doesn't ask him. He drives a car, but it's not the shit that she's saying in this clip. What would she do to evaluate him beyond the things she finds out? That she finds out he's not a criminal, he's not in jail, he actually has a job, whatever. Those very basic fundamental things, not crazy stuff, but the fundamental things. She finds that out. What does she do to find out if he's going to be a good partner, a good man? Let's specify that.
Yeah, she doesn't.
Okay, that's an answer.
I mean, the reality is that anytime you are truly in love, right? It's this crazy leap of faith, and that's what makes it so fucking great. Most people, look at the one that you chose, and they go, yeah, in retrospect, isn't it weird? Because like he or she or they had all these red flags. I thought I would never go for this type or that type, or a person with that job or this and that, but it was something about them that blew all that out of the water.
Yeah, but let me challenge that for a second, and you tell me if I'm wrong with this. I think if somebody was below a certain acceptable level of character, and talk about morality, let's say somebody was a pedophile, or let's say somebody was a murderer or a serial cheater. Do you really believe, like the movies always tell us, that you wouldn't sense that you wouldn't, when you're dating somebody, if you're dating them long enough, let's say a couple of months, 10 dates or so, that you would not very quickly be able to ascertain that person within a certain margin of error? I mean, obviously there are people that have been together forever that end up being serial killers or whatever. I'm not saying across the board. I'm just saying in a very general way that you won't fall in love with that type. And if you did, it would wipe out all of those red flags.
If you, in the intersection of the true intoxicating nature of love and its ability to park your critical functions, that and your own unresolved internal woundings and projections, object projections and self projections. And I think you find a vast majority of people who will say that they've been in relationships where there was this sort of thunderclap awakening of a realization that the person they thought that he, she, they was turns out to be the opposite, and they can't believe it. They run from them in the night. Holy fuck!
Yeah, but I believe that's due to complexes. I think that if you were out of the box, just like we were talking about earlier,
so this is
knowing what's right and wrong. Now go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think so. You're saying if we're taking someone who is at a normal level of organization, who's you have found the 1 in a million that doesn't have a drop of neuroses, or maybe has only just a drop.
Well, yeah.
Would they not see it? No, they probably would.
But would they still fall in love?
Well, you might, but I think one of the functions of a healthy, mature psyche is that I can be in love and say I won't go any further because that's not me following through on that is not good for me or you.
Okay, agreed.
Mhm.
Definitely would agree with that.
If you chose a person and discovered that they were homicidal, pedophilic, whatever,
Yeah.
the true act of love would be, I'm going to call the police. You're going to go and you're going to turn yourself in for the things that you've done. You're going to pay, you're going to pay what you owe in terms of time served. You're going to make amends in that way, and then while you're doing that, you're going to work on yourself. And if you come out the other end having done that, and the man, woman, otherwise that I need you to be, then maybe I'll be here for you.
Yeah, I'm making an argument that, and I'm curious again, that's why I'm talking about it, to see what you think of it, that this thing we call love, whatever the hell that is, okay, this intoxication, this fantasy engagement is created through a lot of sixth sense stuff, a lot of stuff that is not necessarily objective. I mean, obviously, if a man you went out on a date with told you he was a serial killer, pedophile, you would not allow yourself to fall into these things, or unless you had some major issues yourself. But
Not that you're within sort of healthy range psychologically.
yeah, right. I'm saying that the whole act of falling in love, it means that, you put two people in a room, they're not going to instantly fall in love with one another. There are some people you fall in love with and some people you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And the act of falling in love, I do believe, has some kind of credence to it.
Mm-hmm.
That it isn't just some kind of insane thing that can happen with 1 out of 5 people or whatever, that has no relation to any criteria at all, that you don't receive the criteria objectively, like through the intellect. You receive it through some sixth sense, kind of through the heart. And that, I'm arguing, and I'm not saying I'm convinced of this, but I'm arguing that only people that have relatively serious psychological issues are going to go through that process with people that are good people, that actually would make good partners. And and I'm tying this into this clip because this girl is not paying attention to any of that. I mean, this guy could be a serial killer. She could sense it through her heart that he was,
but if he
and it didn't matter if he has the money.
If he met these series of demand, you mean, so like what if, so okay, all the demands that she was making upon a potential male partner were met in this guy, but
right,
he was profoundly broken morally. He was ethically, completely a mess. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think it's important to remember too that, like, when we talk about this idea of love, that we love, that it has a history. Like, allow me to play Nietzsche. Like, if we think that, like, this kind of love, this infatuation, this whatever is just like archetypal, I think we're wrong, because it has its roots in the troubadours, and it has its kind of pinnacle in the Shakespearean worldview, the triumphs over the Greek, that essentially is the foundation of our understanding of ourselves as being human. I mean, I'm completely convinced that Harold Bloom's thesis that Shakespeare essentially invented the human in many ways, whether or not we realize it or can trace it back. And that's the kind of love that we're talking about, is Romeo and Juliet. And so so I don't know that it's archetypal. I think that there is also, like, think about it, go pre-Shakespeare and go back to the Greek worldview, and they had 7 different versions of love: Philos, Eros, Agape. They understood it as a spectrum in a way that we sort of see those things as sort of being a little bit disparate and not as connected.
Yeah, love is the worst topic to talk about. I mean, we could,
I don't know,
or one of the best, right? It's like it certainly is a topic that I know you and I could sit here and talk about literally for 2 million hours. It's got so much. I mean, there's so much to it. Yet Yeah, that doesn't diminish the importance of it and what it is. Like, what is it related to appreciation? Is it related to seeing a beautiful sunset or the appreciation of nature? Is it related? I mean, of course it is. It's related to all these things. So, romantic love between two human beings is it totally dependent on sex? Orientation. Two gay men, is the love they have the same as the love that two heterosexuals have, or the same as the love that a man has for his sister or for his mother, and or for a mother for her children? I mean, it's so complex, and that's where you have all these weird overlaps, where you have pedophilia and you have these kinds of strange things, because the love then turns into something that we consider abnormal and fucked up. A man that falls in love with his car and has an erotic, not sexual, but a really deep. I think I said this one time on this show. I don't know if I did, but when I was a kid, about me falling in love with my sister's stuffed dog? Did I ever mention that here? Something. Okay, all you people watching this, tell me what this is about. I was about 9 years old, and my sister had this purple poodle, which was this big dog, and she had it on her bed, and I used to like stare at this thing. I would go up to her bedroom door and I'd open it a crack and I'd look at this dog. And I identified the feeling later when I actually fell in love with real people, and said that was the same feeling. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't sexual at all. I was 9 years old, but I was infatuated with the way it looked and its eyes. And I mean, it was really bizarre. What is that?
You can hire me.
Yeah.
We'll spend an hour exploring this deep romance that you had with a
yeah. It was very cool. I
think a lot of what, how you would explore a phenomenon like that is, to explore it. I would even take a Greek stance. Like, is this philos? Is this like appreciation? Was it exquisite in that thing that struck a chord in your heart of its beauty? Or was it erotic? Was there something in you that it rose, a kind of libidinal energy that wanted merging with the thing? Anyway. But yeah, that's great. I mean, I love stories like that. I mean, I think that they, speaking of like the normalization and validation, is this incredibly essential tool for the therapeutic process, whether that be in a counseling relationship, whether that be in, the healing functions within art. It's so healing and amazing and beautiful to see how vast the human experience is.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what fascinates us in this.
If you look at it from a non-judgmental, non-pathologizing view, I mean, it's kind of amazing and exquisite and kind of astounding that you had that experience. Yeah. Never mind what it means. Never mind what Freud would say. Like, well, isn't that cool? Wow. Yeah, right. It was cool. It didn't last very long, but the thing that was odd about it is that it was the same feeling. I've been in love with things too, but just because they have different feeling to them. But this was the same in the sense that I looked at its eyes. I had a focus on its eyes and the shape of its face. And, I can feel something close to that with my real dogs now. There is a love for them that is related. There's no erotic sexual part to it, obviously. I'm not interested in having sex with my dogs. But it's all the other stuff. There's a sense of, I want to hold them. So there is a physical part of it. And just like a man wants to hug his daughter or his son, it's completely devoid of sex, but hopefully, or the eros is not, it's not about like penetration, but it's about,
right.
There's something erotic about,
yes, there is. Yes, there is.
And then, yes, you see these people, and it's always I love the joke of like a sort of like it's a white thing that you kiss, tongue kiss your dog. And that somehow black people look at that and look at white people doing that and account for that as a race.
I never heard that.
But no, I think there is a kind of eros relationship that we have, especially with dogs, where we want to merge.
Yeah. No, there is.
Full affection.
There is.
And we love to personify them and give them names and dress them up. And there's also something profoundly grotesque about the whole thing, but also weirdly.
From the dog point of view, probably so. I mean, there is an anthropomorphizing.
grotesque than a dog in boots, or
Right.
or kind of with a fucking French beret on. Oh,
Yeah.
we're not. Who is it that said the problem with? I think it was like a French person. Maybe that's why I'm thinking of it. Is that like the problem with the Americans is that they have no sense of the absurd.
Oh, well,
they're
that's
absurd.
true.
I mean, this is probably like Alexis de Tocqueville way back in the day, because he made all those great, sort of cutting insights into the American psyche. But no, I think there's something legitimate there about we don't realize how fucking crazy it is that we walk around with a poodle with a fucking French beret on it and call it
right,
and have this erotic relationship with it. There are people in this world for whom that is just fucking bananas.
Well, we should wrap it up.
We should.
Hope everybody's good. And please, once again, we make this plead every time to make comments and let us know what we're doing.
Comment about Todd's strange interest.
That's my strange love for my dog, my stuffed dog.
Or maybe someone out there will be like, "Oh my God, I've never heard anyone say such things. I thought I was the only one. You wouldn't believe what I had."
Well, that's just it. I mean, how many people out there
for a stuffed pineapple?
That's right. I mean, really, seriously, there's so much stuff like that. I like the stuffed pineapple. I mean, there's so much stuff like that humans experience that no one ever knows. No one ever hears the story. I mean, we hear a lot of it as therapists.
They don't know what it means.
I know. It's like humans are very interesting. And we get a little bit of it as therapists, but I can guarantee you, I certainly don't do it with my therapist. I don't tell them everything. And there's a lot of things that I've thought about or even done that I haven't told anybody. And never will.
Yeah, I mean, if the outcome, the outcome of therapy is, I mean, I agree with this, that essentially one of the things that we'll notice is that we have just become more unapologetically eccentric. That our peculiarities and particularities are no longer just accepted, but they're exalted in a way. But I think that the mechanism of transformation and healing in that is the therapist's or the provider, whatever you want to call it, the facilitator's capacity to just embody that.
Yeah.
And, this is pure Irvin Yalom. There's no level of disclosure that he ever discovered that had a negative impact on the relationship in the container. That he showed up fully himself. And
no, I agree with that. And going
unapologetically, crazy. Like, tell your client that story and have them and give them permission, to see it through non-pathologizing eyes and to see
I have shared stuff like that.
I think that's very healing. I mean, I'm coming from an existential, background in psychotherapy. And so I get that a lot of other practitioners see that as completely fucking bananas. I mean, there's some Cog B people out there that are rolling in their fucking.
Oh my God, yes. Forget that.
In their clinical whites. But hey, I mean, this is the one way of looking at the human experience. Yeah.
And just going back for 2 seconds to the Prager comment, it's like we all as therapists, whoever is out there watching that's a therapist, we always make, just like you were saying, we judge, we determine when the right time is for a particular thing to interject. And, I do believe that before you're going to be able to tell a client to grow up, like he said, should be the first thing you say. You have to create that trust. You have to create that container that is open to. And I think part of that is accepting your client as being, hey, you're a human being. Tell me about the stupid shit you've done, and I'm not going to judge it. And it's like, judging it was like, grow the fuck up. That's a judgment that on your client's actions. It's a judgment. And before you can do that, you have to let them know you're not going to judge. You're going to maybe suggest things that could help them, but
but that's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, look, if you think I'm going to sit here and tell you that I'm not judging you, you're wrong. I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing, and I'm not going to condemn you. But I'll judge you. I'll judge me.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, that's a semantic point. The word judge.
I think you should have done that or said that. I think that was actually kind of fucked up that you did that. Did you not realize?
Yeah, right.
I'm not condemning you, because believe me, and then this is the relational existential piece, because believe me, I've done similar things thinking that I was in the right, only to realize that I'm the asshole in that situation.
Yeah, good. Really important point.
Let's explore that you're the asshole with a little bit of love and compassion for ourselves, because we can all be there. But you're right. And I think, but there's two ways to look at that. And this will be my last comment so we can close. Either it's going to be within the the hard work and the safety that's been built up in a relationship and in container in which you can do that, or it's going to be there. I have, it's like the person that's going to serve that bitter medicine to me can do that because they have nothing to lose. I'm nobody to them.
Right.
They'd be like, hey man, you don't know me, I don't know you, but let me just give you a little dose. You're a fucking asshole for what you did, and you need to see that, and you need to grow up. There are situations in which that's exactly what needs to happen. Because if it happens in the right moment, when you're ready to hear it, it might take a minute for that seed that to truly come to blossom. But in myself and a lot of clients I work with, they'll go back to those moments where, like, I don't know, I heard that person, they were 90% wrong and 10% right, and that 10% right actually broke the trance. So,
well, that's what I meant by not judging, but meant by assessing a situation and knowing when the client is ready for, as cliche as that is, but ready for a certain kind of approach, whether it be, or what you said with judgment as condemning, it's judgment is not necessarily rejection, and that's condemn and reject are the same thing here.
Like we said in a couple episodes or many episodes ago before, you're asking me about, like, what is there, what's the limit? And I'm like, well, if you tell me that you are a criminal and you've been breaking the law, that you've been harming children, for example, you might feel rejected by what I'm about to do, but it's not a rejection at all. It's me calling the police and having you sent away and saying I won't work with you. In fact, not only that, but I will watch as they take you away in handcuffs. That's not a rejection. That's tough love. It's actually an acceptance of the part of you that can heal that and move that through you, give you a chance. If I sit here and sort of go, well, now let me work with you therapeutically, maybe one day. No. You need to pay your dues. You need to take.
That's a projection. Then if you're like that, you're actually not integrating your own shadow. You're not realizing that somebody who does that shit, you're capable of it too. You're probably well enough put together that you're not going to behave that way. But it's still part of the human thing. I mean, it's like, well, if you did it, it means I could do it. I mean, I'm capable of it.
Justice is how justice can be healing.
Yeah. Well, that's another conversation.
When we're met,
that's a cultural conversation as to.
Yeah, it's a great one. There we go.
Yeah, it's really important. Yeah. Anyway, we'll end on that. Everybody out there, please let us know you're there. I don't care if you just comment, hey, whatever. That's good enough. Just comment and like.
Go in the comments and judge the shit out of us.
That's right.
Completely.
Right. Tell us we're
full of shit.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be fun. Well, and we'll talk about you on the next session. If somebody does that, we'll even name your name and everything. If you're,
we'll dox you.
Well, we'll analyze you
while we separate the poison from the medicine. All right, man.
Okay, everybody, take care, and we'll see you around.